Brilliant. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eleanor, and I'm the Chief Executive of Impetus, and I am delighted to welcome you to our event this evening, which is my first since returning from maternity leave. We have a superb panel, but also audience, which should provide the right conditions for open, honest conversation. First, we're going to hear from long-time ally and champion of Impetus, Saba Nazar, who will say a few words about the Leadership Academy and why Bank of America, under her expert leadership, has sponsored this work over the last few years. Saba is the Managing Director of Investment Banking Division and co-head Global Financial Sponsors for Bank of America. Saba is also consistently ranked in the Financial News Top 100 Women for European Banking and Finance, which is no mean feat, but it does not surprise me knowing her. She is a formidable person with invaluable experience and insight to share in this important space. We're then going to hear from Charlie Rayner, Investment Manager at Impetus, who will share a brief overview of the Impetus Leadership Academy and our insights to date before handing over to our panel discussion. So I encourage you to listen well, reflect, actively participate, and then commit or recommit yourself to delivering race equity in your work and beyond. So, over to Saba.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Impetus team, for inviting me here this evening, and thank you all for taking the time. As Eleanor said, Saba Nazar, I've been in investment banking 30 years, believe it or not, and have been involved with Impetus and its predecessor organization since 2006. So I have seen the team at Impetus evolve, the work they do evolve, and have been very involved over the last, whatever it is, 15, 20 years. What I will say is that one of the great things about Impetus is their ability to go out and find amazing charities that are often at a very early stage of their life and help them grow and incubate them to become great charities. And one of the things that I have always done is track closely the charities that Impetus backs, because once they get bigger and more relevant, bigger organizations like Bank of America and others can be a big funder and supporter of those charities. So, at the bank, we have a program where every year we pick a charity of the year, and we do a bunch of fundraising events, and all the employees get involved. And I think 70% of the charities in the last 10 years that we've done this with have been Impetus-backed charities. So that tells you something about the closeness of our relationship. At Bank of America, we take our philanthropic giving, and Kelly Jo, who runs the program, is here in the room today. We take it very seriously, and I sit on the board of the Philanthropic Trust. We have backed across the UK and Europe over the last, 20 years or so, a bunch of amazing charities. And what is important to us and what is our ethos is backing organizations that are about youth and employment. And a big overlay on that is a diversity overlay, where it is imperative to make sure that the organizations we're funding are providing opportunities for youth that normally wouldn't get those opportunities. The other important thing is very much around, and I see another Bank of America employee there, another important thing is making sure that we back organizations where our employees can get involved in a meaningful way. When Impetus was at the outset of thinking about the ILA, we immediately latched onto it. Because the idea that you would have the opportunity to fund, sponsor, mentor future leaders in the world of philanthropy was invaluable to us. And I must tell you, having been involved in this program the last couple of years, it has been great. It has been great for, I think, and I know that many of the first cohort and all of the second cohort are here tonight. I think it has been great for the people that have participated in the program. I can tell you it has been great for the Bank of America employees that have been involved as mentors, and incredibly fulfilling and enriching in terms of the relationships they've built. And the success of the program, even if I look at that first cohort, and the fact that I think 10 or so of the people in the first cohort ended up getting promotions or moving jobs to higher roles, etc. And that for me is having real impact, and real impact that we can see. So we are proud to be sponsors of the program. I thank all of you for your support and for your participation in the program. And we're looking forward to cohort 3, which hopefully will start in September. So Charlie, Eleanor, Harriet, Kerry, all of the Impetus team, thank you very much for allowing us to be involved.
Thank you, Sam. I was told I wouldn't have a microphone, so I was prepared to be projecting my voice in it, so this is a privilege. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to what will be a provocative discussion, I hope, on the real meaning of diversity and how to achieve it in your organisations. It's been mentioned twice. I'm Charlie. I lead the delivery of the Impetus Leadership Academy, and I also work across our youth unemployment work, specifically on our race equity work. Before I hand over to Chiku and our panel, I want to say a few words on why we're here this evening. Our mission is to transform the lives of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, making sure they get the right support to succeed in education and work and life. We're incredibly proud of the amazing work of our charity partners and social enterprises. Like every well-intentioned organisation trying to deliver social equity, we have our blind spots. In 2020, following the murder of George Floyd, we had a reckoning with the language of our mission. It was impossible to ignore the absence of race equity in our mission and subsequently in our work. We started a new fund, the Connect Fund, which explicitly aims to invest in organisations addressing race inequity and youth employment. I'm pleased to see many supporters of that here today, and support, I believe there's some representatives from our Connect Fund charity from our youth project. But this isn't enough. People from minoritised ethnic backgrounds are more likely to live in poverty as children, are less likely to get a job after they leave education, and all of the life trajectories that obviously entails. At the same time, 7% of charities in the UK are led by people of colour. 4% of charity CEOs are people of colour. We know that the organisations with proximate leadership, where leaders have been personally impacted by the social issues faced by their beneficiaries, are better equipped to provide solutions. The ILA is our response to that uncomfortable reality. It's been humbling to work with 24 inspiring and talented and passionate leaders over the last 2 years. As I said, as alumni, I hear from the first cohort as well as the current cohort, and we hear it from some of them later this evening. We hope that by supporting these leaders, we can begin to address this inequity to serve young people and the talented leaders of today, and we'll hear, and drive towards a racially just society. If that sounds grandiose and ambitious, it's because it is. Diversity committees around the country convene, and hands are wrung, and tiny steps are made. It doesn't help me when my speech falls off the table. That's a dramatic moment. Some of you might be familiar with a statistic from 2015. At that time, there were more FTSE 100 CEOs called David than there were female CEOs. Thankfully, there's been progress since then. Actually, in 2022, I believe there are fewer than 6 Davids. And there are 6 FTSE 100 CEOs from minoritized ethnic backgrounds. But there are also 6 CEOs of FTSE 100 companies called Andy. Why is this progress so slow? I'll hand over to Chiku and our panel to offer some answers to that question and some solutions about how we can speed things up. Thank you.
You are the second year of graduates of the most loved program, hands down, at Impetus. Nobody loves anything in Impetus as much as they love the ILA. So thank you for all you've taught us, all you've given us, and we hope that tonight is the start of a big celebration journey for having survived 12 sessions with Impetus pro bono people and investment people and fundraising people to learn how to do more and better in your roles. Here, I think Charlie said Charlie did mention this, that we are aiming to grow our work in race equity. We're bringing in 2 new organizations to invest in. We're doing another cohort of young leaders. We do also, I think this year, Eleanor, want to work on ourselves, and we recognize as well that we've got work to do to be better organizations in terms of our own inequity in the ways of working. And this afternoon, I was reminded by that. We had one of our charity partner chief execs talk about all the brilliant love he gets from Impetus once he's through the door, but the difficulty that he had getting through the door at Impetus. And that was a reminder to all the work that we've got to do ourselves. So in the spirit of openness, I was told that I could make this spicy. So panelists, we need a bit of spice tonight. Let's just not have, horribly polite conversations. Let's try and stay with some difficult stuff today. Yeah. Shall we start off? I think we've got a great panel here. Maybe I'll just start off by asking you guys to introduce yourselves and maybe say, on a personal, professional level, doesn't matter which one, why equity matters to you. Lewis, would you like to begin?
Well, spicy has to work. I just got back from Jamaica on Saturday. Yeah, a whole lot of spice going on out there. But so by way of introduction, my name is Lewis Howell, and day to day I run 2 organizations. One is called Revolution Hive, which was set up by me and 2 friends of mine 7 years ago. The mission is to equip young people for life beyond the classroom. We do a lot of work in the education sector. My other organization, 7PK, is on a mission to help people in disadvantaged situations to have more equity within society. So a lot of our work sees us doing a lot of consultancy, training and capacity building around both social mobility and equity, diversity and inclusion. And also chair an action group that's seeking to tackle racial inequity in the youth sector. Why does equity mean so much to me? If I'm being honest, at times, I actually think about some of the opportunities that I'm afforded today on a professional level and realize that I'm not the norm. In some ways, I feel like I've been able to be the rose that grew from the concrete, because sometimes I look at the opportunities I get and I go, bro, like, it's actually really cool that I can be I was going to say young black man, maybe I'm just younger looking, it gives me the coconut in the shape. Anyway, a young looking black man who gets the opportunity to enter certain spaces, build relationships with certain people, not only open doors for myself, but open doors for others. But then I realized this is not normal. So the reason equity is important to me is because actually there are so many people from my community and communities similar to mine who are not afforded these same opportunities, who cannot necessarily take up and be held space for in the same way. And to me, that's not good enough. So that's why equity is important to me. But don't worry, we'll turn up the heat in a little bit.
Yeah, what he said. Our very own Shireen Mahmood, can you go next? Introduce yourself and tell us why this matters.
Sure. So hello everyone, I'm Shireen. I run a program called The Exchange at an organization called the Forward Institute, where we work with organizations from the private sector, the public sector, the social sector, who want to come together to have these difficult and spicy conversations about what it means to be responsible. And for all of those organizations, building diverse organizations is on their agenda. Everybody's struggling with it, and everybody wants to talk about it, but maybe not having spicy enough conversations, so I'm excited about that. The exchange brings leaders, senior leaders from these different organizations to exchange with each other, a bit like a foreign student exchange. They go into each other's organizations to see the world through somebody else's eyes, and leadership through somebody else's experience, different contexts. And the idea is to mine for difference, and to see that difference as an asset that we should be looking for, because we are better together. We are better when we see difference as ways to build on ourselves. And I'm sure we'll talk more about the challenges of doing that. So why personally do I care about this? Well, I come from a multi-ethnic, multicultural background. And I was always searching for something. It was only as an adult that I'm able to have language to articulate that I'm looking for that cultural exchange, the richness that comes from these differences, that I struggle to find because so many spaces do not afford that, do not afford people to bring their richness to them. And so it matters to me on a personal level because we're missing out on a lot by not having and appreciating and loving the differences that make us better.
Lovely. And Raj?
Good evening. I'm Raj Tulsiani. The reason this matters to me is both personal and professional. So personally, I've been hospitalised twice with racially motivated attacks. I'm from dual heritage background and I've experienced racism on both sides. And I just thought the world was supposed to be a bit fairer, particularly when we're getting paid to work in an organisation. There's supposed to be rules around that. So in my own social and creative journey from living in a bar shop to turning up overdressed to your lovely friends.
Dapper, not overdressed.
Thank you. You're a good chair, I can tell. Everything I do professionally involves inclusion, intersectional inclusion. But my thing is around, if you unleash inclusion, you unleash productivity, you future-proof organisations, you move away from amplifying aspirations and pretending their actions. So whether that's through my headhunting business and diversity consultancy Green Park, whether it's through the back of a flag packet, community interest company we run, Race Equality Matters, that provides free services to 4,500 companies and touch 4 million people in race equality this week, or whether it's through our foundation, which is chaired by the now EastEnders actor Colin Salmon, although he was a James Bond actor, but we tried to get him. All of that comes back to this holding a mirror up to organisations. And as an independent minority-owned set of businesses, I think you can be quite challenging and ask people not to mark their own work. And particularly in the charity sector, there is endemic comfort levels and groupthink around marking people's own work.
Yeah, exciting. We've got such a diverse set of perspectives on this panel. It's going to be good to get into. Lewis, can I start with you maybe first? And there'll be some questions that I ask all of you as we go through. So describe your work a little bit more. We heard a bit more from Roger Shreen, sort of what they do. But I'd love you to pick a couple of examples in your work of things that you've seen being done well, where equity is put into the heart of organizations, where you feel there's money where people's mouths are.
It's actually interesting that you've used that word equity twice now, because obviously the title was focusing more on diversity, and I was going to spice it up by saying, the title being diversity matters, but why is it taking so long? Well, then maybe there's an opportunity to challenge that and say, well, then maybe it doesn't matter enough. Do you get what I mean? Or maybe it doesn't matter altogether, because diversity without equity, it means nothing. Because if we was to really break it down, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, diversity is numbers. Let's be 100% honest. Diversity is just numbers. Like, I can say, yeah, we've got 40% of people from racialized communities in our organization, but it doesn't tell me where they sit in the organization. Like, they could all be at the bottom level. Do you get what I'm saying? In which case, it's irrelevant. But equity says, what are we doing to use resource, and in this case, money, to remove the barriers that exist to those people being able to, one, go about having more influence and ownership within that organization. And ownership, what I mean by that is the ability to control resources and be able to really have a stakeholding in the way that organization develops and grows and progresses. So effectively, yeah, equity has got to be possibly more important, well, genuinely more important than just the diversity alone. So in terms of where it's seen to work well, it's interesting because I had a meeting with an organization that we do some work with a couple of days ago. And one of the interesting things about an internal leadership program that they had kind of co-developed with us and we delivered some training on is they've got a group of leaders who are from racialized communities that, well, they're leaders now, but when they started, they weren't in leadership positions. And obviously the program is structured to support their development into leadership, into management. Now, not only does the organization decide upon what the content of that program should look like. So, we're going to bring in these external organizations, including like ours, to come and deliver things, but also we're going to give them some agency by giving them a budget to say, go and find things that you think are relevant to you. So that's one way you can automatically start to create agency, because agency is a critical part of being able to create equity. It's not just about prescribing someone's journey by saying equity is going to look like this because this person, once the barriers are removed, is going to go on this journey. But also giving them the agency to say, well, actually, how do we give you the opportunity to control what your journey of development and progress may look like? But on top of that, it's tying in the opportunity to get feedback from those individuals who may have felt as if they were in more challenged, and if we're being honest, oppressed situations, to say, well, actually, what is it about our culture that just doesn't work for you? And I think that's something that we often overlook, and we don't create a space where people feel like they can be honest about that, because there are a lot of professionals, if we were to be 100% real, who feel if they were to be honest about the culture in their organization to those people who are in positions of power, they feel like it's professional suicide. They feel like if I start saying that, not only am I going to then be vilified in this organization, but word's going to get around in my sector, my industry, and suddenly I'm becoming the difficult person. I'm becoming the one that's like always stirring up trouble and causing a ruckus. And it's like, that comes from a culture where we're not open to genuine brutal feedback. So therefore, equity becomes a challenge because we're not open to someone saying, yeah, do you know, this is what I think of the culture here. And I think induction is often a missed trick. Induction is a great opportunity to get genuine feedback about the cultures and subcultures that exist in organizations. Because that person who's getting to know the organization is seeing it fresh. So how do we give them the space, the permission to be that honest and that brutal? So anyway, one example being the opportunity to not only have a program, but also give agency to people on them. And then I think other examples as well, to me, come from being able to marry the outreach work that some organizations may do, not solely for the purposes of attracting more diverse talent, but sometimes they're doing that outreach as part of, good CSR and social mobility and stuff like that. But tying that closer to the way in which, if opportunities are then afforded to people from some of these communities to become employees at these organizations, how are they then supported to be able to be valued in that organization once they arrive? Because I had another conversation with an organization just yesterday who said, we're failing on both fronts. Like, we're not getting much diverse talent, and when we do, they're gone very quickly. So actually, they have to go hand in hand. The outreach must be done in such a way where you build genuine relationships in those communities, not just saying, oh yeah, we funded this thing or we spoke at this thing in a community that we don't normally engage in. No, how many meaningful relationships do you have with local organizations, grassroots organizations, individuals that are movers and shakers in those communities, where you're really close to them, you're understanding what's happening in those communities, so that by the time someone who maybe from that community does, let's say, apply for a job, or, in the case of a funder like Impetus decides that they're going to apply for some funding, we understand their situation properly. We're not just guessing that. I think what they need is, no, you should know. And you should know because you've been that close to that community already. So putting your money where your mouth is not just throwing money at things, but also having the resource to be close to it. And in some cases, that's also about hiring people from those communities who you can give the autonomy and agency to play that bridging role for you as well. They need to be representative too. But sometimes we don't trust people that ain't from the community to come and say, yeah, we want to do work with your community. We don't trust you. So we don't trust you. I'm not going to lie. We're not sure if you're someone that I can really put my trust in. So you need to find someone that looks like me, that understands my situation sometimes, to be that bridge. And that's systemic now. We can go into that later, but sometimes that's just the case.
Yeah, no, thank you. Gosh, that's really rich. Agency, decision-making, listening, not just attracting,
but... It's getting so hot now. I'm spilling water. I'm having to cool down. Do you get what I'm saying?
I want to pick up on something around the progression piece that you talked about and culture, because culture is so important. We obviously all can tell cultures that are snobbish and mean-spirited and horrid. Is kindness enough? Is a culture of kindness enough for inclusion and equity?
I don't think kindness is enough, because the truth of the matter is, to have hard conversations, you can't always be kind. So yeah, you might be kind from the standpoint of having manners and being courteous and being polite. We all appreciate that on a human level. But also sometimes it's necessary for someone to be honest about where, you know what, growing up, I'll be honest with you, I grew up in a family where I wasn't taught to like people from your community. Let me know that. That's all right, because now we can have the real conversation. Or actually, sometimes it needs for someone who's from the racialized community that's finding it challenging to be able to feel as if they're fully seen, fully heard, fully valued, to be able to say, on this occasion, I'm not going to communicate in a kind way, and I need you to afford me the space to do that without vilifying me after. Let's just call a spade a spade. Misogynoir is a real thing in our society. Like, I've heard it many times, but you know, there's this whole stereotype of the angry black woman. Black woman has a right to be angry. They live in a sexist and racist society. I would hope they're angry. I would want them to be angry. Do you know what I'm saying? If I live in a society that's oppressing me on multiple fronts, I'd be angry too. So how do we afford them the space to say, yeah, in this moment, I'm not going to be able to communicate in a very kind way, but you need to listen because you don't understand my experiences. And even me as a black man, I need to shut up and listen too because I don't understand her experiences. I don't understand an Asian woman's experiences. I don't understand an Asian man's experiences. And in some cases, they're not going to communicate kindly. And I need to be okay with that. But what I need to do is take the time to empathize, take the time to understand, take the time to go away, reflect, and then say, well, what can I do with what's been shared with me? So kindness is valuable, but we can't expect it at all times. That's the difference.
Love that. Fucking love that.
Now we're getting spicy, you get what I'm saying, yeah?
Shireen, tell us about organization, either your organization or organizations that you've seen that have also sort of acted with substance, let's say, on this issue.
Yeah. It's quite difficult because people are struggling with that, but and I'll come on to that. I wanted to just say a bit about culture because it came up in a sense. And culture is often this kind of amorphous thing that we can't really understand how culture is built. But culture is built by lots of small actions and behaviors, not necessarily. We have a right strategy, we can do all the data work and recognize the gap, and we can have all the best intentions in the world and be very, very kind people. But that doesn't necessarily lead to results. And that's one thing that I come across a lot with the organizations that I work with is they're very well intentioned and they're very committed to this vision of a more inclusive and diverse organization. And they're genuinely stumped about, why is it happening? Why is it taking so long? What else do I need to do? And part of why we send outsiders into their organizations is to say, you know what, your culture is very strange to me in these ways. Or when I hear these words, it feels different to me. So trying to get under the skin of what's happening in your culture and the fact that behind that is often kind of mindsets and being kind, but still having a certain mindset about things and having to do the hard work to get into kind of what are some of your assumptions about the world, what are some of your assumptions about your own agency to be sitting in a certain part of the organization, to have access to certain resources, to be given certain things. Are we doing the work to really challenge some of our own assumptions and our own mindsets, which we think aren't a problem because we're very nice and we're very kind, but actually it goes far beyond that to really think about what are some assumptions about how what my role is in this organization, what my organization's role is in the bigger system that is driving some of the inequality. Because when we really talk about inclusion, as you're saying, because it's about kind of not just ticking a box and saying, oh, we've got lots of different people that look different on paper, but actually not being honest and authentic. Why not? What are some of the assumptions and behaviors in my organization that are stopping them from doing that? So what we find is a lot of people don't know how to get behind that. So they recognize the problem, they don't yet recognize the solution. And what I see in terms of what looks good, there's a lot of data. People are looking at data, and they are feeling uncomfortable about the data. And they're putting certain things in place. So I do see kind of some attempts at changes around governance, or changes around hiring policies, or affinity groups. So there are definitely those kind of practices being put in place. But they're not having a desired effect. And I think where we need to have a conversation as a society is, well, obviously that's not enough then. What's missing? And I do think part of that answer is our mindset and our assumptions about power, about agency, about our own roles. And we need to stop being nice and start being honest. And I don't see a lot or enough of that yet in most cases.
Yeah, wow. Raj, I'm going to move to you because you've had decades at the coalface of this business. No, you're a young-looking. Did you say young-looking guy? Young-looking guy with decades of experience. What's changed? Is what Shireen's saying? Does that resonate? Tick box exercise. Know the problem. Not thinking more creatively enough about the solution.
It's not a lack of thought, it's not a lack of data, most people don't need to spend thousands of pounds on consultants to know that there's a representational problem, to know that there's disparity of outcomes, to know the disparity of retention of staff. Right? All of that is hiding in places that the Big Four create to sell boxes. What's really interesting is even when there is the will for leadership to do something, there isn't the skill. And they go to diversity departments or HR departments, which our leadership series shows are less diverse themselves than many other parts of the organisation. So I think we've got a series of small problems that, when put together, create this quadrant where the race always goes in the top right-hand corner as being too difficult. And I know social mobility today, but how long people be trying to use social mobility as a proxy for not dealing with race? So I think from the 50 to 100 diversity audits, policy reviews, all this other kind of funky stuff that people in my business do, you basically see some really simple things, right? You see there is a lack of understanding the supply side of any equation, whether it's talent, whether it's retention, whether it's customer demographics, whether it's frontline services, because there's this hand wringing around, our demand. And then when they talk about culture, they're effectively manifesting what they think the culture is. And of course, as my two wonderful panelists have really said, it's not one thing. It depends where you are, what you're looking for. If every organisation is a glass box, we're all staring at it from a different angle, depending on where we're from, what our experience will be. But what does make a difference is when you coach the board and the leadership and the ethnic minorities that they're grooming for leadership, because it's important that you don't just turn up and look different and act the same in the future, because that will kill credibility for the people who are now sitting where you're sitting. When you talk about target operating culture, so in order for us to deliver our promises, it's not about what we do today or what we did yesterday. What is the culture we need to build to deliver that? Because then when you recruit, when you promote, when you pay, you're paying against a future framework which is much more inclusive, equitable, all of that, but actually it's been designed to succeed. And where a lot of this breaks down is people who aren't racist or sexist, really, but who just don't give a damn. And they're like, I wasn't trained for this, I'm not here for this, I do a really good job, already doing well as an organisation, why is this being laid on me? And as soon as you make that silent majority neutral, or understand how this is in the best interest of the whole organisation, themselves included, because most organisations only operate around self-interest, then you get a very different power dynamic. And I appreciate what you said about power, but in organisations, people are supposed to act a certain way, they're just getting paid to deliver on organisational promises. And I think leadership, even when they've got the will, lack either the skill, the access to the experience, or the critical friend to turn around, that's not going to land. You can't build the ocean here.
Thank you. And how do you respond to clients, potential clients who say, Raj, I get you, you've humbled me with your story. I really want to change representation and power dynamics in my organization, but it's like a house. I have a friend of mine, Mohammed from Spring Impact, says it like this. He's like, I've got a leak in my house. I need a plumber. I need an engineer to come, a technician to come and fix this. That's what I need. I'd love for that to be a brown woman or a black man, but I need the plumber. And you aren't giving me enough plumbers who look like that. What do you say to those people?
Well, in that exact circumstance, I'd say, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
If you're saying, so a lot of the work we do as a firm is board work, right? We've got about 225 people on boards every year, and 35% ethnic minorities, right? And 10 years ago, there were a lot of people who looked different, who had no interest in being a black finance director. They're all out now, though, right? It's all part of their personal brand. And that, for me, is some form of progress. We just keep them honest about creating impact. So when someone says the talent isn't out there, I say, how many do you need? And it's not just me, it's their own. They pay people to scan and pipeline talent. We had one today. I wasn't involved in the conversation, but effectively there's no talent out there. My consultants are like, out of 60 million people, saying there's not one person from each protected catchers that can do the job. Of course there is. They're just not interested in your business. Because how you go into market, how you're positioning your values, it doesn't ring true to them. So I think there is a place for challenge, there's a place for data, but genuinely, people should have more common sense. And if we don't provide that, and sometimes it is clearly limited. I lost one of the big 3 tech businesses that make really nice phones, and one of the big 4 in the same week by saying, I don't agree with your corporate black screen policy, it's just tokenistic nonsense. I got whipped off. I thought I was going to get removed from my own company, people were so angry. But if you don't stand for anything, you're going to allow anything to happen to you, and we should be a bit more responsible.
Was he going to come in, Shereen? You sure? Go for it. Alright, nah, just because I saw you, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think the point that you made earlier about power, Shereen, especially around affinity groups, and then what you followed up with there, Raj, is really important, because I talked earlier about that opportunity to be able to, if not fully own, at least control resource. And I think that plays a part. And I don't want that to be misconstrued, but when you talked about affinity groups starting to appear, the challenge is they're not effective, right? Is what you said. And I think that is so interesting, because oftentimes those affinity groups are either allowed to be created or encouraged to be created in organizations for the purposes of people having a safe space to share with people who are from a similar demographic group to them, which is fantastic. But I think this is when we start to move from being solely an affinity group or a forum to being more of an action group, if the group so desires. Again, where I don't want it to be misconstrued, I'm not saying that you're getting the people who are in that particular community to start doing all the work to change the organization. That's not what I'm saying. But what we can start to consider is policy change within organizations as part of an equitable commitment to where that group can start to have more of a voice in certain decision-making processes. So we don't have very diverse people on the board. That's fine. But we've got a whole affinity group of people who are from the organization who sit there. What if policy could say, actually, no decision can be made unless there is representation from those people from that group around the table? You change that policy, you now give them power. Now suddenly you have got diversity, at least in the room. They may not be there in title yet because they're not in the SLT or SMT, but you can still have them present in the room when the decisions being made. And going back to what Raj rightly said, not expecting them to conform to the culture of that space currently, but actually saying, we want you to bring your whole space into here, to be challenging in here, to represent the views of this particular community where necessary, but also tell us where clearly we don't know enough. But the fact of the matter is putting them in a space where they have just as much weighting, and I would argue actually, in some cases, more weighting. I think in decisions that affect their community, they might actually have more weighting in terms of what their voice means in that space, the power that their vote holds, etc. But automatically that can start to balance the scales, and that's what equity is about. We've all seen that illustration of like the people trying to watch the sports game and you've got a certain amount of boxes and all of, we've seen the illustration, so we know what it means. You've got the affinity group, they're not in SLT, but you can still say any SLT type decision needs to have representation from at least 2 people from that group. They're already there, those people will jump at that opportunity. That's effective equity work.
I would go for it. If we're going to
Go for it.
Because I agree with you. So we're starting to see affinity groups great. And in fact, we talk about good practice. This morning I was having a conversation with an organization, and they've created a separate governance body which holds the SLT and the board to account, which is informed by the affinity groups. So the affinity groups feed back to them, and then they will say to the board and the SLT, you're not doing a good enough job, and we hold you to account. But my challenge to us, when we talk about kind of mindsets and changing our underlying assumptions, even the example we gave where the SLT could be informed by these minority groups, to me, we're still allowing the power to sit in an inequitable way, because we use things like shadow board. We recognize we're not diverse enough, but we should have a shadow board. Now, why do we use the word shadow there? What is the underlying assumption that we are making that it requires the word shadow? If you think they should inform your board, why are they not on the board?
Yeah, I'm not in no one's shadow. I'm not trying to be in your shadow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your shadow, that's between you and your shadow. I'm not involved in your shadow. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not Peter. My shadow's not light. I'm not Peter Pan. Do you get what I'm saying? So like, yeah,
we're not malintentioned. We're kind. We're doing it because we're trying to do the right thing. And I feel the same way about the term reverse mentoring. Why are we reverse mentoring? Surely I'm the mentor and you're the mentee.
Simple.
Why do you want to retain the title mentor? And I think it's not because we don't want to learn. I think not even because we want to, or consciously want to retain power, but I think there are some underlying assumptions and mindsets that are ingrained in us because of the world that we all are participating in, that we do need to step back and question and not be afraid to innovate and say, let's not make it a shadow board.
Yeah.
Our board needs affinity representation. They might not have all the same qualifications as my SLT, but my SLT is missing and lacking some key skills that my affinity group have. I mean, both of those skills.
And I don't think it should be informed. I think they have to have a seat at that, as in the decision cannot be made unless they're there. That's the level of power I'm saying. If they're not there, you can't even make it.
It's not realistic. In race equality matters, one of our network groups is about 1,500 ethnic minority chairs, and we ask them, like, who's doing the work? 76% of them say some ethnic minorities doing the work, even though we're the minority organisation. And then we ask them what percentage of allies, and what's the difference? 24%. So that means 3 out of 4 allies are not making a positive difference, even though they put themselves out there, right? So the problem is institutional. And when you talk about affinity groups, which I've got really mixed feelings about, the one in the team biscuits, I've actually thrown out practically an NHS thing, saying, why are you arguing about parking spaces? You've got this great opportunity to affect how decisions are made, and you're making it all about your promotion. So I think without terms of reference, without funding, when we did the first round of stuff for affinity groups, we had to take our free guide back and go to mental health first aiders and go, what people are telling us is that problems of change are much worse than the problem of all of a sudden I'm the person in charge of fixing race, they don't give me any money, they don't give me any support, but it's on me. So we have to think very carefully, organisation by organisation, because cutting and pasting kills any kind of impact. Because what we need to get them to do is co-create solutions with us in the governance. To expect us to be at the top table, maybe some firms will do it, most will give some kind of crap excuse, but to have some real structure and governance, that's a big step forward. And we need to not try and pull the ocean, because that leads to companies going, well, the action we've taken is we set this thing up. That's not action, that's not impact, that doesn't change anyone's lived experience. So we have to be more strategic in terms of the diversity dashboard we want them to create, because that's the only way we can really drive accountability.
I agree with that, definitely. I think, so the example that comes to mind when you say that is there's an organisation that we do some work with who have been very clear on, for example, they have no issue finding diverse talent at an early careers or junior level, but as you can imagine, obviously struggle at the higher levels. And so for them, the organisation has created a program for leaders from more diverse backgrounds to, in theory, be able to accelerate into leadership. But a lot of the people who are in the organisation don't feel that that particular program is fit for purpose. So when you talk about the co-creation of solutions, I completely agree with that. I think the issue that arises though is when we're not present in the situation, in the spaces whereby even a decision like that, like, let's create that program. It goes back to what you said before. Where did that leadership even get that idea from? Probably some external consultancy that didn't take the time to fully understand the context, use a cookie cutter approach, and then you've decided to roll something out, but it's not fit for purpose. So my argument is that actually, similar to what you said, actually, I think some of these affinity groups can just be spaces that are not necessarily that productive, which at times we have to be real is necessary. For some people, they just need a space. But
what would make a massive difference is if high performers and top talent from ethnic minorities didn't give the affinity group a massive swerve.
That's a massive point. That's a massive point. Expand on that before I go. No, because I know what you're going to say, but go on. Expand on that before I go, because I want to say something.
So when you look at the composition of these affinity groups, and you look at the senior ethnic minorities in the organisation, they give it a swerve. It's like they take a career meeting, or it's like an angry coffee shop, or it's not good for my personal brand. And what we need to do is to say, well, actually, if part of your personal brand is your diversity, then it's not just about how you look or what characteristics, but it's what impact you have. So if you can't even have an impact in your own organisation by helping make your affinity groups more efficient, more valuable to the organisation, more trusted, then don't position yourself to me as a headhunter or directly with another move as someone who's a diversity champion, because you're a diversity avoider.
But the challenge there is that in that example, the culture of the organization is not valuing that affinity group. So it's not in that person's self-interest to be in that group. And so there's a question for me about what conversation that organization is having, both those in the affinity group and those out of the affinity group. Although I don't think there should be anybody out of the affinity group, no one in the affinity group, regardless of your ethnicity, protected characteristic or not. So I'm quite curious if you think non-protected characteristics should have an affinity group, but that's a separate question. They should be asking themselves, why is it not a good thing to be part of this affinity group? The culture is not safe enough, the culture is not valuing diversity, the culture is not trying to genuinely be diverse and inclusive if the senior leaders don't see that as happening.
I think
It isn't the basic premise of leadership changing people's minds.
Or maybe profit, it depends
no, I think the point Roger's saying, and I get where you're coming from, Shireen. I think it's when that person is from an ethnically diverse background, but is concerned that being part of that affinity group that right now feels like a space for complaining solely swerves it because they don't feel it aligns with their personal brand. And I agree with you. That means there's something about the organization's culture that's causing those people to not be valued. But then the challenge of that person who is also probably representative of that community choosing not to at least show some interest or at least be present. The challenge, and I'm not saying all the pressure should sit with them, just so that we're very clear. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is actually the truth of the matter is once you get into a leadership position, understanding what's happening in the organization is just par for the course. So actually, why are those people complaining? Now, we've got an organization we're working with at the moment that have only two people from a racialized background, one black man in leadership. And he does talk to me about this person. He says, Lewis, I find this hard. It's almost like I'm expected to be the voice of all black people in the organization because I'm the only one. And I said, and I hear that, but I said, you know what the challenge is? Because you don't go to the forum for the black colleagues, they're not really sure they can trust you right now. And I'm not saying that you have to go there and smile and then advocate for everything they're saying, but also maybe share some things in there about your experience and how it may differ and help to educate them, help them to, as Roger's saying, potentially change minds about, I understand why you're frustrated, but there are some other ways to approach things. And okay, so what can I do to support? And actually, what could I be getting some of the other allies to be doing? But I said, because you're never there, it's actually kind of creating a divide. And I'm saying, not saying you have to even go alone. I'm saying, actually, how can you create opportunities where their voices can be better heard in other spaces then? If it's not solely about you going to that space, how do we create spaces where their voices and experiences can be better heard across the organization? Because right now, they're just feeling completely unacknowledged. So I understand where it's like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. But I think by solely choosing not to engage at all doesn't necessarily help either. So we got to choose which one's going to be progressive.
Yeah, I think you can engage and not be an expert.
Yeah.
And I think people have this pressure on them because the person's senior in the organisation, they need to have the answers. Or they think they're going to be in a sandwich between disgruntled staff and management, And a lot of that is about how we define our leaders, because a lot of ethnic minority leaders don't know anything about diversity apart from their own personal experience, and half of them got double PPs from Oxford. So there isn't one experience, as I did a bit of research with McKinsey recently on this split between Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and Black heritage experiences and career paths versus Hindu and Sikh, particularly in financial services. We see Hindus and Sikhs and Southeast Asians do well financially, all this kind of stuff. But over here, there's still some real institutional barriers. Yeah, and I said, we really need to talk to the people who made it and see how many of them are hiding because it's just not their bag, and how many of them just don't know what to do, but are desperate to find something to make them real models to use Yvonne Thompson's phrase, as opposed to just being a role model because I'm up there. And there is some real insecurity in that leadership community as well.
Guys, we are running.
Shireen.
Go on.
Maybe our question about why is it taking so long, one of the things, we talk about many, but is because people of ethnic minority or protected characteristics feel like it's their responsibility. And that's a really huge burden. I think the message, and I know that ILA talks about this a lot, but it's everybody's responsibility in society. And we shouldn't have people of ethnic minorities or other protected characteristics feeling like it's their responsibility. That's part of the delay.
True.
I could listen to you guys for hours, but I know these guys have questions that they want to ask, and I want to make sure that we field some of those because Charlie's glaring at me from the back saying we're running out of time. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to pose to any of our panelists, either to all of them or one of them? You can select. I think someone's going to go around with a mic. Kerry, go on. The lovely lady with her hand up. Who'd like to take that?
I don't mind start. I'm sure panelists can also jump in. I don't think you start with the ones that require that encouragement. I think you start with the ones that are closer to being, like, you might have seen the image before of the spectrum of allyship, but you don't start with your ones that are active opponents. Start with your ones that are closer to this end, who are already active allies or seeking to be, and start with them, because it would be ideal to have every single person who is from outside of that demographic be an ally. But the truth of the matter is not every single person is there right now. So start with the ones that are closer to home. Start with the ones that are already closer to being an active ally, who possibly have gone on the journey to do some self-education, who are already developing the skill set of empathy, who are willing to lean into those uncomfortable conversations, and start with them. And what will happen is some of the people who were maybe closer to the middle of that spectrum will start going, oh, what's going on over there? Do you get what I'm saying? Suddenly they're seeing that food's cooking, music is running, they're thinking, right, what's going on? Like, can I get involved? Do you get what I'm saying? They found out there was spice, they said, right, what? Oh, I like spicy food too. Do you get what I'm saying? So now they're going to be interested too. So you don't start with the ones that require that level of encouragement. I think you start with those who, one, are willing to be active, and two, if they also so happen to have some influence, or at least can exercise some influence and use power, then fantastic. We start there and we make whatever changes, as Shireen rightly said, we start with the changes that seem to make the most sense for our group, using those allies alongside us. And then people are always attracted to success. Once you see a couple of small wins, it starts to build, it will start to snowball.
I would set a very specific, tight agenda for progress.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell people exactly what's expected, and then I would try and live the hell out of them.
Yeah.
And I would start with the allies, because they've really made either a vocal or an emotional commitment to move things forward. And if it's just talk, then they'll get found out. And if, like the majority of people, they actually do want a more inclusive culture for whatever reason, then you're mobilising the biggest army straight away. And you're moving the onus away from ethnic minorities to change the culture and generally minority non-whites as well.
Shireen, do you have anything you want to add?
I'm curious what trainings are really effective, but maybe we can chat after the panel. The only thing I was going to add was this point of the affinity groups. I sometimes feel like the affinity groups are very isolated to protected characteristics, which is signaling. So again, when it comes to culture, what are the signals that we're sending that reflect our assumptions and mindsets? We're making an assumption or we're signaling, the affinity groups are going to become a group and work it out. When actually I think unprotected characteristics or allies need to come together as well, so that they see it as their responsibility to do work. They're part of this, we're all doing it, and they might not cut across ethnic lines or other protected characteristics. Let's figure out how we want to create these groups, but everybody should be in a group, because otherwise some people are going to feel like, oh, they're working out, I'm going to just get on with it.
But then, I'm going to be in 6 groups. I'm going to do
Well, no, we can work out and we can pick a group, but yeah.
It's tricky though, isn't it?
It's definitely tricky, and you have to have a conversation, but what I don't want is some people not being in a group, because what message am I signaling the organization? Some people, that's not theirs to solve. They're okay, they're kind, they can just keep being kind. The group's gonna work out.
Oppression Olympics is a real thing. Like, they call it Oppression Olympics, and it's a real thing. And I think a lot of it is built on a tendency to want to gaslight at times as well, and say, no, you don't worry, our team's worse right now, like, don't you see what we're going through? Why are we fighting about who's having it worse? Like, that's, So anyway, the point of the matter is this. I think someone mentioned values earlier. When an organization has demonstrated that their commitment is to diversity, equity, and inclusion, full stop, we don't need to fight about who's got it worse, because we know space, time, and resource is going to be afforded to go about focusing on all of these different forms of oppression, all of these different forms of inequity. And so today we may talk about race, but I am fully aware that this organization is committed to tackling the issues of every protected characteristic. So I know the space, time, and resource is going to be afforded for gender, and for sexuality, and for physical ability, and for migrant status, because I know my organization is fully committed. It's not just, oh, suddenly George Floyd died, let's think about race. Oh, it's pride, let's think about, no, I know my organization is committed to this, full stop. So it goes back to values, and it goes back to commitments, and we talked about leadership earlier, but the truth of the matter is, if we can see that leaders are fully committed and not just paying a lip service, but fully committed, we will start to appreciate that it's going to be given that space, time, and resource. Then we don't need to fight. I don't need to fight and go, oh, why are we not talking about race today? Because I know we're going to get to that. Do you know what I mean? But today we might be talking about disability, and I'm okay with that because my time will come as well. But I need to be an ally in this space today. So yeah.
So I think if you tackle it as a business problem, you get a different construction. So when your organisation puts in a new IT system, like say SAP, they know there's different components, right? But they construct it so the components work together. They don't go, we're going to spend 40 million quid on gender over here and then like build this massive tower and put a moat around it. You know, what they say is actually, well, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is the business payback we're looking for. And then when you move it from them doing a favour or protecting their brand or getting something for their marketing to something that is constructed to help them deliver their business problems, then you suddenly get a different level of investment, a higher calibre of people getting involved because they see it as this is a way I can make a bigger difference to myself and to the organisation. And it just moves to a completely different orbit. Not all organisations will do that, but that is the place you want to land, where they're doing it not for us, but for the organisation to deliver its promises more efficiently.
Some more questions. Go on. The lady in the centre with her hand.
I'm not gonna. Oh, sorry. Let me let it go. You go first, Raj. I feel like this question was made for me.
It's a lovely point, isn't it? And obviously one that resonates. We've trained over 3,000 white leaders this year. And, you know, it's a bit like the centre of a stone underwater. If it's not going to take, and the culture and the expectations of leadership don't change, you can provide training, but under pressure it disappears. I think the thing that has changed, lots have changed, and you know, we still index pretty well against the rest of the world, but our narrative is so aggressive about inclusion here that we all feel we have to see some change in every 3 months. I do think one thing that has changed is that there is a movement away from investments to fix ethnic minorities. And there's a very good piece of research by one of my competitors, Justine Loderook, at the Centre for Synchronised Leadership, which shows what boards were talking about diversity pre-COVID, during COVID, and now. And actually, of those 70-odd boards she looked at, diversity, well-being, it's all gone right off the chart, apart from race. And maybe the problem is that we're still talking about it in boards, as opposed to actually creating the conditions where there's more empowerment, or to use some of the arguments that have already been really well put together. There's more investment and agency to turn around and go, just get us from A to B.
I can't, obviously I don't work for Impetus, but one of the things that I can share today is that I'm very grateful that I'm going to be working very closely with Impetus around some race equity policy advising. So it's not so much that we're going to be doing loads of internal stuff, but helping Impetus to learn from the fantastic work they're doing on the Connect Fund, the ILA, to think about how they can then start to influence in policy spaces. But the reason I mention that is simply because I think your questions are phenomenal. So the first one around, does it suggest that there is a lack of skill? I don't know if the program suggests that. My understanding, and I speak for myself here, of the Connect Fund and the Impetus Leadership Academy is that it's more about the fact that programs that support people who have the potential for leadership or who are on journeys to leadership haven't been necessarily afforded the same level of training and development opportunity that their white counterparts have done. So that's the reason for its existence. The second part, which is around, does it acknowledge the existing leaders? Very good question. And I think actually the work that I'm understanding Impetus is starting to do, and I know GP rightly said that there's still a journey to go on, is definitely about being able to get closer into different communities to understand where do those organizations led by people from racialized and minoritized communities that are doing amazing work and who display phenomenal leadership by having someone from that community in a leadership role, where do they exist? Why don't we have relationships then? how do we go about being able to amplify their voices, their awareness, and their reach? And I was speaking to some of the team on Monday, and they were saying that actually, even in recruiting the last 2 organizations that joined the Connect Fund and the ones that are going to come, that was an active piece of work they did. They said, we realized we don't have enough networks in those spaces, so we need to actively go out and develop those relationships. The third one, though, about actually where is the opportunity for those people who may be, for example, white leaders to acknowledge where. I'm going to frame it how I've been describing it. So I mentioned earlier that I chair an action group called Triumph, which is trying to tackle racial inequity in the voluntary youth sector. And that's exactly the program we've been designing. Is I was in a room similar to this with predominantly white leaders last year, and I was just talking about similar topics to today. And just out of interest, I said, how many of you don't know about the wheel of power and privilege? 2 people. How many of you don't know about the cultural iceberg? 2 people. And it just made me realize if you're not even aware of how you can start to reflect upon how the innate ideologies, bias, mindset, prejudice that exists within you because of your perceptions, attitudes, beliefs, and values, and what's contributed to those. If you're not aware of that, you're not aware of how your decision making is affecting inequity and equity. So that's when I realized that's the program we need. For you to come together and start to reflect upon how your own decision making is affecting inequity as a result of, through no fault of your own, the experiences you've had thus far. That's the program that also needs to exist in the sector. So I'm glad you said that, because it's in the works, but I don't know how close we are yet, but it's in the works.
I'll just add a few things. So again, language is such a huge part of what drives culture in organizations, in society, in this room. And so I think it's really interesting. We do have training for our white colleagues. We just don't call it leadership training. We often call it inclusion training. I think it's really interesting to rebrand it as leadership training. And I think what we currently understand to be leadership needs to be reviewed fundamentally. What we currently understand to be success needs to be reviewed fundamentally. What we currently understand to be how we organize ourselves in organizations needs to be fundamentally reviewed. For example, just to be spicy. At the moment, we think that lots of theoretical learning from very old established institutions and doing the same job for many, many years makes a very, very deal. We could say, actually, it's an incredibly narrow perspective, because you've been doing the same thing for 30 years. You have been taught in an institution that has been teaching the same thing for hundreds of years. So that's actually not something to be rewarded. And in fact, what we need is something very, very different. But we need to question that for ourselves. And I don't say that because I want to throw out everything we've done and how we're organized. But it's to create a small amount of space to be creative and say, if I did question that, what might I put instead? And then, what do I want to do? Do I want to move in a certain direction or not? Do I want to double down? Or do I want to change? Because we've built structures of inequity. And to unbuild structures and rebuild the structures, we have to be prepared to question how we think. We not take everything as the right way.
Hear that? Any more? Charlie, how are we doing for time? One more question. Great question.
Great question.
Love that.
So I've been involved in the audit where the chief executive got fired. So it happens. As you can imagine, it's not terribly well publicised. I think with banks in particular, there is a DNA deep belief that an increase in diversity comes hand in hand with an increase in risk. So we recently did a piece of work for a global bank, 13 technology mandates, we placed 17 ethnic minorities. And the feedback was like, where did you get these people from? We're like, well, you kind of read the CVs, they're from your competitors. The talent is out there, the opportunity isn't. So for an organisation to be serious about linking comp to diversity, inclusion, equity, and all the other wonderful words that get misused every day, you have to be very, very specific about what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, how you're going to measure the impact of that. Because it's got to be about more than bums on seats.
Can I just add to that, if that's okay? Just because I work in financial services and we focus a lot on retention and the progression piece. And oh no, I mean, can you hear me? Right. There was an interesting piece of research around this that showed that those that were from a lower socioeconomic background progressed 25% slower than their counterparts. And if you identify as a black man and you're from a lower socioeconomic background, you progress 32%. So there was whole quantitative stuff that then said loads and loads of organisations feel that, so loads of these individuals feel that they have to conform to these dominant cultures. So the issue is that we should be fixing processes, not people, and there were these conversations around whether targets should be placed, because the Parkin Review of Financial Services states that, you know, a certain number of ethnic minorities need to be on boards at senior levels. So just to your point about you know, risk, I'm quite intrigued to understand what your thoughts are about targets in certain sectors and whether you feel like they work in the right way.
Yeah, so I was on the panel for the Parker Review launch this year, and it wasn't as good as this panel. I think,
Go Impetus, yeah. I like that.
I think the reality is people take crap advice and then mark their own homework. So I'll give you an example, name blind CVs. People are like clapping themselves on the back going, we fixed it. And I'm like, why do I have to hide my identity to work here? If you're biased, when is it going to manifest itself? At paid time? At cutting numbers time? At bonus time? Yeah. So, you know, we're kicking things down the hall, kicking the can down the road because we don't have people in the room with lived experience. And that's why whenever I get asked, I try and do things like this because you're the people who are going to have to get in the room. And then you're going to have to be more than look different. You're going to have to find a way of translating your passion and the stuff that you learn from these amazing speakers. It's a pleasure to be here in a way that works for your organisation. So it's easy to cut and paste from next door. It never works. It never ever works. Even if you do the right thing, it doesn't land. So it's difficult to land.
So financial services in particular, they go to exec search firms to say we want diverse talent, but then the exec search firms feel like they're not getting the information they need from their clients. There's this disconnect. Is that something that Green might do to kind of remedy?
Thank you for the plug.
Smooth, really. Send him the invoice after, yes?
No, there's about 25 things you can do differently in an executive search process to increase the likelihood of appointable diversity being there at the end. Most search firms don't do any. What they do is the same thing they've always done and then go, what kind of box do we need to tick at the end? And then the candidate's like, hold on a minute, my lived experience of this is rubbish. You're not helping me get what I want. You're not helping me understand how to win this. What you're doing is providing a shortlist that looks different because it protects your fee structure. So until there's diversity in exec search, how can we expect diversity, anybody to do anything different to create diversity? Because they're based on time and materials. Scumbags.
I just want to quickly, I know we've got to stop, but I want to acknowledge just the original question because it's a very, very powerful one, because effectively what you're saying is we're willing to be data driven and make decisions around that, especially from an incentive standpoint when it comes to most other areas of business. However, in this area, we tend to be quite soft. So I think there's an interesting point you made there, because first of all, I agree with you. I feel like your question kind of answered itself, but I like that because it was like, no, but let's just think about it like this, which is good because we need to consider the point. But it's interesting because to add to your point, it's almost to what extent does the qualitative go hand in hand with it? Because that's why I like the fact you mentioned that, because if we solely looked at it from a quantitative standpoint, it doesn't always necessarily take into account the point around culture as well. But if some of our measurable progress can have cultural indicators as part of it, then we can start to hold those leaders and people in positions of power to account as it relates to, well, we all agreed that our indicators of progress were going to include these things, even around culture, and we can gather that from a qualitative standpoint. So if you're still not achieving on that front, then boy, you know what? I'll see you later, innit? You get what I'm saying?
All right, guys, I hope that you have been inspired by these panelists. Please let's give them a round of applause because we're actually going to close with words from our ILA graduates who we are here to celebrate. I think we are kicking off with Sarah, and then we're going to have Jane, and then So last.
Alright, so that's, I'm not going anymore. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this session. One thing I thought was really interesting is the word belonging didn't quite come up, which I think is really important to me. So I've definitely been in spaces where I felt like I belong now. And I used to work in youth, and there were quite a few places where I didn't feel like I belonged. And I think it has to come, it has to be sort of top down, even quite a flat structure at work. But you can really feel that culture of being accepted, being who you are, being whole self every day. Whether it's little things like when Ramadan's coming up, like, you know, it's brought up in team meetings, we need to change things around. It's very much permeated all the way through. And so it then feels like it has to be a very special conversation. And I think Lewis also touched on being open as well, like having a culture where you feel like, you know, you can have discussions about anything all day long, anytime. And so that's been my current experience. I'm going to hand over to Jen.
Hello everyone, I'm Jenny from Impetus University. I'm the Regional Operations Manager of North West London, but I'm also Head of Diversity and Inclusion. So I thought this was a chance to have a shameless plug of how we've done diversity and inclusion well at Impetus University. Just like many organisations, 2020 was a very hard time. George Floyd's murder and the Black Lives Matter movement was a time for reflection. It shook the table to say, actually, we are not doing things well. We can't even respond to such a tragic event. All we do is, you know, we say what we think we should say, but it's not right. And that really reflected on what the leadership looks like. So one thing I would say for us all is to have that courage to speak up and say when something's not right. And that's what I did, and that's what helped in terms of where we are now with diversity and inclusion at Impetus University. So there are many things that we've done, but I do want to talk about the challenges that we have faced, especially as a Black person, a Black woman, because you've spoken about all the things that are good and what we should be doing. So I don't really want to bore you with what we've done. You can look at my blog on the website if you want to know what we've done, our strategy. But it's being that spokesperson is what we've spoken about. You don't have to be a person to speak about diversity and inclusion and what that means and what that looks like. You don't have to be that person that comes up with a strategy. That's not up to you. So it is important to have that senior buy-in and making sure that they are there and they are doing the work. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say, that you should be the person doing everything. And yeah, I don't want to talk too much because of course you want to socialise, you want to network, but that's the main thing. So for you all that are part of your senior leadership teams, you need to make a stand, you need to make sure that you are doing the work, and it's not up to us as the Black people, as the people of colour, the LGBTQ, the people with disabilities. It's not up to us to do the work, it's up to you. So that's what I want to say.
Hi, I'm really sorry. My name is Pusla. When Charlie asked me to say something, I had to do a 10-minute speech, so really sorry, I know I'm speaking about me. So as usual, I'm going to start with a really great quote, just to elongate my speech, so sorry. It's not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to recognise, accept and celebrate those differences. And that's a quote by Audre Lorde, an American writer. Diversity, and especially in London, is all around us. You can look in this room, and it is all around us. But why does that not translate to senior leadership position? What is it that's preventing diversity in these key decision-making places? I'm the Director of Success for All. We're a small educational charity up in Newcastle. And I am so lucky and fortunate that I work in a really, really diverse team. And we have low turnover of staff. So I asked them, I said, why is that you like working in Success for All? And what they said to me was, I allow for flexibility. I feel listened to in Successful Role. It is a safe, spicy place. I was going to say fun, but since spicy is being used. So in essence, what they were saying to me is that I make them feel like I want them to be there. And I give them the space for them to fully be at Successful Role. And that is my role as a leader. And that is every leader's role in an organisation. We need our staff to turn up to work. And we need our staff to be able to work at their full potential for us to be successful in what we do. So if your place is not diverse as what you'd like it to be, it is pointless looking outside of your organisation for the solution. The solution lies with you as leaders of your organisation. You're the ones that dictate the tone of your organisation. And we know that diversity in every single form, so whether that be race, gender, sexuality, disability, those that we see and those that we don't see, socio-economical backgrounds, boosts innovation. And the saying goes that if you build it, they will come. And building an organisation definitely lies with the leader. They need to create that safe space to have those conversations. So story time about my personal family. When my mum married my dad, so my mum's Belgian, white Belgian, and my dad's black Nigerian, my granddad, so my mum's mum, said to her, "You do know that by association you will now be treated as black." So building a diverse community or a diverse organisation is not easy. It will challenge you and it will force you to reevaluate your biases. It will make you feel unbelievably uncomfortable. And it will force you to rock the boat. And it will make you vulnerable. You will become the black person in your organisation, like what everyone's just said here. And it requires a team to have faith and trust in their leader, that leader is valuing a diverse community, a diverse team. And so, how have I built faith and trust in my team? Well, I've listened to them. I'm flexible to their needs. I'm unbelievably hilarious. And I genuinely value each one of their individual traits, no matter what it is, even if I find it difficult. And sometimes some of my moments of that are difficult, but they have strengths where my weaknesses lie. I should also say that in my first edit of this little section, I actually said, well, I built a diverse team because I am black. So that's why I built it, but actually that's only 10% of the reason why I've been able to build a diverse team. So I spoke to an amazing mover shaker in the whitest county in the UK, Cumbria. It is 98% white, so just so you know. And she's out there fighting the good fight. So Janet Walker, CEO of Anti-Racist Cumbria. So note takers. Janet Walker, yeah, CEO of Anti-Racist Cumbria. Sometimes those in the Northeast were not always included in your conversations down here in London. And she is doing amazing work to shake up the status quo up there. And I asked her, I was like, oh, Janet, guess what? I've been invited to talk to a bunch of people in London about why diversity matters. Great. And she said to me, and what she said to me genuinely floored me. I was shocked. And she said, we did not create this issue. The lack of diversity in your organisation, guess what, is your fault. And it was built because of the white walls of solidarity. And she's right. I did not create this issue of lack of diversity in organisations. And yet again, I'm overextending myself by being here to talk about this issue. Why? Because it is an opportunity for me to talk to you about successful role. And I hope you'll indulge me one more time with a personal family story. Sorry, I know it's hot. But my dad retired as the Deputy Managing Director of North Tyneside Hospital, which is an area of Newcastle. He was well loved by everyone, from consultants to junior doctors to nurses and to cleaners. He spoke to every single person in his hospital. Why? Because he knew that it was his responsibility as a leader to do so. And as a black doctor working in the northeast of England during the 90s, he had a tough road to the top. And he never made it to the top. And it was something that truly broke him in the end. He was an extremely talented doctor. He revolutionized respiratory medicine in the UK. And he was given an award by the then Prime Minister, Tony Blair, but yet he was still overlooked for that senior management position in North Tyneside Hospital. He dedicated his life to the NHS, and he retired bitter, frustrated, and tired of fighting and saying the same things over and over again to the white walls of solidarity. He died a few weeks back, and it made me cry. I said, I wasn't going to swear or cry, damn it, let's go. He died a few weeks back, and it made me really reflect that I am battling here for success for all. And I'm battling to be recognised in the same way that my dad was battling to be recognised. Shit, I usually did not cry for a whole 2 weeks. And every year, I battle as a black leader in the northeast of England. I work my ass off, okay? And every year, another white-led organisation comes in and replicates the work that we do and uses their connections and that white wall of solidarity to get the recognition that I really want and I deserve and my team deserves. And it hurts. It generally hurts. And those experiences cause trauma. I'm so sorry. And like most black-led organisations, Success for All, we will go under. We will cease to exist. And I know this because I did the research. And I did the research unpaid, because no one else was doing it. So we will go under. But what I will say is that if we do go under, I will not go and work for another white-led organisation. Because you do not see the work that I'm doing right now, why the hell would you see the work that I would do as your employee? So just like my dad, I don't want my passion for diversity to be the hill that I die on. Because it's not an issue that I caused. So, to conclude, and Charlie promised me somebody would swear, I don't give a shit if your company is not diverse. Why? Because Success for All is, and I created that space, and what I'm going to say to all the wonderfully talented people in the ILA who are unbelievable, is that you have space at Success for All, where you will be valued, where I will genuinely, to the bottom of my heart, love the differences and the challenges that you cause me. Thank you.